Is all from us. There's of course continuing coverage on the BBC News channel right now, but now on BBC One we join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.
Tonight on BBC London, a community in shock. Tributes are paid to the Essex MP Sir David Amess, described as the most committed MP you could ever hope to meet after he's stabbed at his constituency office.
I'm in Leigh-on-Sea, a community he knew and loved, speaking to local people who feel a deep sense of loss tonight.
So yeah, I'm just shocked really that this has happened.
You can't imagine, can you? Somebody stabbing somebody else nowadays. It's just so wrong. And we know him because he used to come in the shop.
38 years an MP. We remember a life of public service. Sir David's death reopens the debate about the issue of security for our MPs. Good evening and welcome to the programme. I'm Victoria Hollins. A good and gentle man, he showed charity and compassion to all. The most committed MP you could ever hope to meet. Just two of the tributes paid to the Essex MP, David Amess, murdered today as he was holding a constituency surgery. The 69-year-old had been the MP for Southend West since 1997. Constituents and colleagues describe a man who was an animal lover and always willing to help. Well, let's get more reaction from our reporter Sonia Jessup, who's in Leigh-on-Sea this evening. Sonia.
Yes, Victoria, I'm outside the local Conservatives Association where people have been laying flowers in memory of Sir David this afternoon. And this was a place, of course, that he spent much time in the 24 years he served Southend West as an MP. We can speak to someone who knew him well. That's Councillor John Lamb. First of all, Councillor, we're so deeply sorry for your loss. You were due to meet him this afternoon, I understand.
Yes, that's right. This evening should have been our annual Conservative dinner. We were all, set to meet him with our guests all over at Saxon Hall, and David in fact had recommended the honoured guest that was going to come and speak to us. So we should have all met up, literally coming up to the time now, 7 o'clock this evening, we would have all been together.
And this will have come as a terrible shock also to the community, because I know he really was a champion of Southend. How will that loss be felt here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he used to champion anything to do with Southend and everything. He was literally fully supportive of the residents. He would go the extra mile to make sure that he would get for them what they needed, and if they had problems, he would get them sorted. Whether it be council problems or whether it be parliamentary problems, he would get involved and he would get people onto it to make sure it happened.
And he died as he tried to serve the community. Did he ever worry about security? Did he ever talk about that?
No, David was always conscious of that it was there, but at the same time he wasn't overly worried about the security, because we had various security measures that had been put in place here at Ivor Hall. But David also decided that he would go out. He wanted to meet the people that he served, and he wanted to go out, and he went around the constituency. So he held his surgeries at different locations. They were advertised, so that people knew where they could go and meet him, and they used to have to book in, and he would then sort them out if they had a problem and see what he could do for them.
And Councillor John Lamb, we are so sorry for your loss tonight. I know lots of people will be remembering him. For now, Victoria, back to you.
Sonia, thank you very much indeed. Well, someone who worked closely with David Amess and who was a friend is the MP for Chingford and Woodford Green, Ian Duncan Smith. I'm pleased to say he joins me now. Thanks for joining us this evening. Can I first of all get your reaction to today's tragic news?
Well, exactly that. It's a tragic day, it's tragic news. I'm enormously saddened to hear about the murder, or it is that now, it is a murder, of a good colleague and a very good friend. But he was liked across the floor, really, on either side, on Labour and Conservatives. Worked very much as a constituency MP. He wasn't somebody who ever had great ambitions to be a minister. He thought it was good enough to be a constituency MP. He makes the point really that being an MP in a way is a vocation. It's not a career because you don't have those kind of choices, but you come in to be a good MP, and he was definitely that. And I'm sorry to hear about it, and my prayers to his family. Terrible loss.
And as you say, a loss across the political spectrum, tributes from every political party we hear this evening.
Yes, a funny thing that's not really often reported. You all report the rancour and the argument and the debate. It's very much part of, politicians in the House of Commons, very much what we do, passionate about ideas and often opposed to other people's ideas. But what isn't often reported enough, I think, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation, is that the MPs like David and others, all of us, we work across the floor often as backbenchers to change things. So we've all got good, strong links in other parties. We are colleagues and often friends with people who we don't always share exactly all the big political ideas with, but on the things that matter to our constituents, you'll often find huge involvement with each other and everybody getting on with it. And that's why when somebody like David is murdered, when Joe Cox was murdered, when Stephen Timms, who's a good friend, was stabbed and could have died, we all feel it because we know what they were doing. We do it ourselves, and we feel enormously sorry that should have happened. So it's a tragedy, but we all feel it at the same time.
And it does, of course, raise the issue of security again for MPs in their constituencies, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we went through this after Joe Cox, and police, I think, were a little bit more assiduous in being outside or near constituency surgery. Surgeries are very easy to get to because, it's known where you go, it's known what time you'll be there. So you are, in a sense, a kind of sitting target. But it can't be any other way because you have to see your constituents and their cases. You go and visit them in their houses. You see them on the streets and in the shops. All those sort of things are normal. But during COVID, it kind of all dropped away because we didn't do sort of sit-down surgeries because people didn't want to come into the closed rooms. And so we went to see people at their houses, outside or in the gardens. And we got out of the habit of it. And I think in a way, everyone kind of forgot about the security aspects to a degree. And I guess probably there needs to be a rethink. I understand the Speaker will do that now as to how this works. But, the honest truth is there's a limited amount you can do. Our job is to be close to people, not to be separated by security. And that's, I'm afraid, comes with its costs, sad and tragic as they may be.
Ian Duncan-Smith, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Pleasure.
Well, our political correspondent Col Mercer joins me now in the studio. And Col, as we were hearing, this has really caused shockwaves across the political spectrum, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think, as you heard from Ian Duncan-Smith, Friday's the day when MPs leave the Houses of Commons, they go back to their constituencies. There will be 650 MPs across the country tonight who are thinking exactly, this could have been me. I do this every Friday. I go out into my constituency. But you heard Councillor John Lamb there talking to Sonia saying David Amess was doing what he wanted to do and meet the people he served. And sadly today we know doing that was what cost him his life.
The air ambulance and the police presence tell their own story. Emergency services called to a local church where the local MP had been carrying out his regular weekly surgery with constituents. Sir David Amess had been MP here since 1997, a big supporter of Southend's bid to become a city. Before that, he'd been in nearby Basildon, an Essex MP for nearly 40 years. This afternoon, he was stabbed to death. Police say a 25-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder.
I'm shocked. I'm really like a dead man. I miss my best friend in the world. I know David for many years, and he was so nice, kind person to everyone.
I think I speak for everyone in the area when I say that we're utterly shocked and appalled by what's happened. It's hard to believe it, really. There's a great sense of incredulity about the whole event.
Sir David was well known in the area, a popular local MP.
Incredible man, just unbelievable that this has happened right here. I used to repair his clocks, so I actually knew him quite well. So yeah, I'm just shocked really that this has happened.
You can't imagine, can you? Somebody stabbing somebody else nowadays. It's just so wrong. And we know him because he used to come in the shop. He was lovely. It's just, what else can you say? It's awful. It's just dreadful.
Sir David was loved by everybody. He was always such a very kindly man. That's the main adjective you could use about him. Kindly and concerned for everyone, all his constituencies.
Sir David's death at what was the kind of meeting that all politicians carry out on a regular basis has once again raised questions about their security.
It just, again, is another illustration of what elected members of either Parliament or councillors, they do their best. They go about doing public duties, civic duties, and you don't realise how much danger you can potentially put yourself in. And I think that's a sobering thought.
5 years ago, Batley and Spen MP Jo Cox was shot dead as she prepared to carry out a surgery with her constituents. And back in 2010, Roshanara Chowdhury stabbed East Ham MP Stephen Timms, again during one of his weekly meetings. This was him speaking after she was jailed.
I realised that I'd suffered a blow. I don't think I actually saw the knife. I shouted something. It was clear she was going to make another stab. I tried to stop her doing that and didn't succeed.
Back then, there were calls for better security for MPs. Reviews were held, measures looked at. It's likely the same will happen in the wake of Sir David's killing. But one of his friends says he wouldn't have wanted tighter restrictions.
I hope that there is not an overreaction whereby MPs remove themselves even further from contact with the public and have screens or whatever it may be. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't believe David would have wanted that to happen, and it's crucial that MPs go on and mixing with their constituents.
Tonight, flowers were being laid at Sir David's local party office, the flag at half-mast, as it was in Downing Street.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister and his Cabinet were in the West Country this afternoon. They came back, obviously, after the news, and the Prime Minister gave this reaction to David Amess's death a little earlier.
Well, I think all our hearts are full of shock and sadness today to the loss of Sir David Amess MP, who was killed in his constituency surgery in a church after almost 40 years of continuous service to the people of Essex and the whole of the United Kingdom. And the reason I think people are so shocked and saddened is, above all, he was one of the kindest, nicest, most gentle people in politics. And he also had an outstanding record of passing laws to help the most vulnerable, whether the people who are suffering from endometriosis, passing laws to end cruelty to animals, or doing a huge amount to reduce the fuel poverty suffered by people up and down the country. David was a man who believed passionately in this country and in its future. And we've lost today a fine public servant and a much-loved friend and colleague. And our thoughts are very much today with his wife, his children and his family.
Prime Minister there, of course, Carl. But we've also been hearing today from London's Mayor, Sadiq Khan. Yeah,
and interesting, because he obviously understands the security risks that politicians face. The mayor of the capital city of the UK is under 24/7 armed guard because of the threats that he's had from both ends of the political spectrum, and he gave this reaction this afternoon.
Look, it's shocking, it's distressing, it's appalling. Many of us knew David. I first got to know David when I was a lawyer, an MP. He assisted with a case of mine which affected his constituent. When I was elected in Parliament, I got to know him as a colleague MP. He was a thoroughly decent man. He was a great public servant, and I can speak, I think, on behalf of all politicians and say he was the best of us.
And it is the most recent of several tragic incidents like this over the last decade or so. Do we have to rethink the way MPs conduct their surgeries? Do we need to tighten security around those surgeries?
But when you speak to members of Parliament, politicians from all parties, they love meeting the public. They deliberately make themselves accessible to the public. They knock on doors to speak to the public and have surgeries where people can come in with any problems they have. We can't cower to these sorts of attacks. We've got to realise that literally MPs are losing their lives. 5 years ago, a dear friend of mine, Joe Cox, was murdered. 11 years ago, a dear friend of mine, Stephen Timms, almost lost his life at one of his surgeries. So I'm afraid we do have to re-examine the security given to our politicians, but we can't lose what is precious about a democracy, which is the ability of politicians to mix and mingle with the citizens, the communities they represent.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've heard all the politicians tonight, haven't we, say we need politicians to mix with people, but I think inevitably thoughts will turn to what better can be done to protect them in the coming days.
Absolutely, a lot to look at there, Carl. Thanks very much indeed. Well, we can cross now to our reporter Lee Milner, who's outside Southend on Sea Police Station. Lee, what more can you tell us from there?
Well, within the past few minutes, we've just had the Chief Constable Ben Julian Harrington just come out of those doors to read a statement on behalf of Essex Police. He said it had been a difficult incident, and at the time, response was immediate. Police were on the scene within minutes, and he stressed there was no wider threat to the local community. The investigation, he added, is in early stages, and as part of that investigation, they will continue to determine whether this was in fact a terrorist incident. He went on to say that today was not only hard and tragic for Sir David Amess's family, but for the whole of Southend as well. Officers have enjoyed a long-standing relationship with him, me also as well as a reporter. And today's incident will be hard to take. Roger Hurst, the Police and Crime Commissioner, described it as a shocking and despicable attack. And they both ended by thanking the residents of Southend and pleading for them to come forward if they have any information.
Lee Milner, thank you very much. So before we go, let's hear a little more on our main story this evening, the murder, of course, of the Essex MP, Sir David Amess. Our political correspondent, Carl Mercer, is here. And it sounds as though this has been the loss of a real public servant.
Yeah, and I think a day to remember, most importantly, Sir David Amess's family, and I think everyone's thoughts will be with them for their horrific loss. But a day to remember also, I think, the service that he gave, 38 years as an MP. Before that, he was a councillor in Redbridge, so he's been around the scene a lot and made a lot of friends, as we've heard tonight. And I think finally, probably a day to remember the risks, I guess, that all MPs, politicians take, and there will be questions asked, I think, about security, as there were in the wake of Joe Cox and Stephen Timms. And I think we are probably likely to see a little bit more security around these constituency surgeries in the coming weeks.
OK, Carl, thank you. Well, let's go back to Sonia, who's in Leigh-on-Sea, where the tragedy took place. Sonia.
Yes, and people have continued to come here to the local Conservatives Association this evening to lay flowers in memory of Sir David. There is a deep sense of loss, of shock here. When you speak to people, they will tell you, you know, that they don't know him just as a local MP. Many knew him as a friend. Many said that he would stop them on the high street or come into their local shop for a chat about what mattered to them in their local community. One person I spoke to, one woman, she said she was too upset to appear on camera, but she said their daughters went to school together, and she told me that she would light a candle in his memory this evening. We're told a candlelit vigil is taking place for him this evening at the church where he used to worship. And one thing that shocked so many people here is the way that he died. He'd gone out today, as he often did, to listen to the concerns of local people, serving the community, which he served as an MP for more than 2 decades, and yet he paid for that with his life. One man told me here tonight that the club will never be the same again.
Sonia, thank you. OK, that's about it from me. I'll be here later with our 10:30 programme. You can get up-to-dates on the killing of the Essex MP, Sir David Amess, throughout the evening on the news channel. But from all of us here, do have a good evening. Bye-bye.